I want to welcome you to the first session of the Mulligan. What we're going to focus on here is really what I call golf. Golf spells the acronym Game of Life First. And so we want to make sure you get your life first before we talk about your golf game. Because life is a very, very special occasion, and a lot of people miss it because they're grinding their teeth on the wrong kind of things. They think that life is all about how much money they make, how much recognition they get for their efforts, and how much power and status they have in their position. There's nothing wrong with making good money. There's nothing wrong with the whole idea of getting recognized for your effort or even having some power and status. What's wrong is when you think that's who you are, because then the devil's got you because you think that your life and your self-worth is a function of your performance plus the opinion of others. And what you miss is significance. And significance really is about generosity of time, talent, treasure, and touch. And it's really all about how you serve others, not being served. I think you become an adult when you realize that you're here to serve, not to be served, to give, not to get. And then finally, the most important thing is life is about loving relationships, loving God first, loving your neighbors, and loving yourself. So this is really important stuff. Have a wonderful time. Have a great life. Don't miss it.
And if you ever played Torrey Pines, it's a beautiful 36-hole golf course with the north course that plays down, and the ninth hole plays par 5, and the huge fence that lines the course, you know, it's like about 5 miles long and 10 feet high and barbed wired. And I went for the green on the ninth hole on the north course and hit my shot, you know, and I thought it was pretty good, and then I pulled it over and it's going right at the fence, you know, and I'm thinking, oh, I hope it hits that fence and kicks back in. Well, we get up there and I look down and my ball was right down in the mesh at the bottom of the fence. And so what we do is you kind of look on it, and if there's any part of the ball that's in bounds, it's deemed in bounds, like you can have one dimple, you know. So it's in bounds, but the problem is I can't play it, and you can't get relief from an out-of-bounds fence. So back then, you could take your putter from the ball, and you could take 2 club lengths, or you could take a driver, whatever, and then you'd have to drop within those 2 club lengths, and then you play your shot. But even with the 2 club lengths out, no nearer the hole, dropping, I was still going to hit this fence with my backswing, so I said, well, that's not fair. You know, today you would get out where you could take your swing and then you'd get your 2 club lengths. So I said, I'm going to wait. I want a ruling. So I'm standing there waiting. And on the other side of the fence, there's a guy sitting on the hood of a car because there's a parking lot and a sidewalk. And he says, I've been watching you. And he says, I've got an idea. I said, what's that? He says, why don't you climb up over this fence and have your caddy throw your sand wedge over and then get out here on the sidewalk and just hit the back of that ball and knock it on out into the fairway. It'll save you a shot. I said, this guy ought to be my caddy. This is amazing. And I felt the fence, you know, there was a little give, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. You know, now I got to get over this fence, you know. So fortunately, back then we had those big old metal spikes, you know, so I'm climbing up this fence, you know, threw my leg over and ripped my pants out, you know. I'm caddy, threw the club up over, and I got the club, you know, and I'm on that sidewalk, and I'm getting ready to hit that ball, and I go back, and there's a car right there. So I can't make my backswing. So I said, look, you got me all the way out here. I can't make my swing. He says, I got a great idea. Another one. I said, what's that? Let's break into the car. So here we are. We break into the car. I'm going, this is a PGA tournament, you know. So anyway, we break into the car, and he jumps behind the wheel, and we get a bunch of guys, you know, we push it out, and then I'm looking around, you know. I hit that thing, and I mean, the dust flew and everything, and it just curved right up in the air out in the fairway, you know. And I mean, I should have gone for the green. But the thing I didn't realize is that across the fairway on the other side was the staff photographer for the San Diego paper. Sports page. Here it is, 2 pictures, you know. It's got me climbing over the fence, and then I'm right at impact, see, and the dust is flying and the ball's coming up, and I've still got this article, and I looked at it the other day, and the camera goes through, and here's this guy sitting in this car like this. Got this big old grin, you know, like, we did it, yeah.
Best prize of the day.
Wow, Wally, just like always, right down the middle. It's a little embarrassing, but...
Well, welcome to the instructional part of the curriculum. And you know, it's not enough to just have a good swing, but you've got to have the mental part of the game. And so to kick off this instructional part, I'm going to turn to the mental giant of instruction. And so, Ken, give them some real insights about how you mentally attack this game and make it fun to play.
Well, I think a lot of you don't realize that the brain and the computer have a lot in common. Neither the brain or the computer know the difference between the truth and what you tell it. If you put information into a computer, it doesn't say, where'd you get those facts are wrong. The computer does whatever it can with the information you've given. For years, we've said about the computer, garbage in, garbage out. And that's the same way about you mentally in golf. I remember when we started the Golf University a number of years ago, people would come to us and say, I can't hit the ball out of the sand. And we would say, you can't hit the ball out of the sand. I said, how did you know that? You said you did. You can't do more than you think you can. So we used to get people coming into the sand and going, wow, I love the sand. I'm one of the best sand players in the country. Now, your mind doesn't know that that's not true, but it gets you ready for the possibility of hitting a great shot. And that's what I always try to do with myself. Now, I don't have the physical skills or the playing ability of Wally, but man, I am mentally tough. And so I need to be mentally tough to hit a good drive. So I'm gonna, just even getting down to tee it up is a real job for me, but mentally I'm ready. And my routine that I've had for years is I stand by here and I see where I wanna go, and then I applaud and I give myself energy, and then I'm ready to go. And I'm really surprised if I don't just kill it. Not past Wally, but just out there. Oh my God, look at that. That's the best drive of the day.
It's great being here in session 1, and the theme of this is our purpose, your purpose. And we all have a purpose. And that purpose is to glorify God and to be known by Him. We were created originally to have that relationship with God. And we're of great value to Him. The Bible speaks very, very clearly of that we all have intimately are designed by God. And we really find that in the Scriptures. And Psalm 139 is just a beautiful one to read. And I'm going to start with verse 1 and read down to 5, and then 13 and 14 from this one. O Lord, you have searched me and know me, and you know when I sit down and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going and my lying down, and you're familiar with all my ways. Before the word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. And then in verse 13 and 14, for you have created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. So what we have here is really a beautiful description of how much God loves us and how He knows our inward beings. He knows our thoughts. He knows our past, and He really knows ahead. And yet He still loves us. He still sees us as really precious beings that He's created and that He wants to be a part of our lives. And that's the whole purpose of this whole session that we're teaching, is to really get a grasp on that. There's another wonderful passage in Psalms 37, and this has special meaning to me because this was really an inspiration for me to write the book In His Grip. And you'll see why. And so I'm going to start in verse 4 of Psalm 37. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will do this, and He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, and the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. The one thing I really see in there, number one, is that He delights in us. And He does, when you delight in somebody, you just enjoy their presence. They don't have to perform, they don't have to act, they don't have to be somebody that they're not. But He just wants us to be genuine and honest and to delight in Him. And it's so easy to get busy, isn't it? And I find myself doing that. And He's going, slow down, Wally, just kind of, hey, hold on. I just want to know you for who you are. In verse 23, He says, the Lord delights in a man's way. He makes his steps firm. Though he stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with His hand. The Lord upholds us with His hand. And, when I read that scripture, it's really interesting because it says, if you ever stumble, the Lord will be there. It says, when you stumble. So it just assumes that, we're going to fall down, we're going to scratch our knees up. And I think about my little grandson, Parker, and he's all the time falling down, He's just only 3. But, you love to pick him up, You love to give him a hug. And so God really wants, that part of our lives. So in my own life, I really wrestled with this. I really thought that I was kind of the center of my life and everything revolved around me, and I really didn't think that there was any purpose in my life. I grew up in a really difficult alcoholic situation. I had a father that really was kind of grading me on everything I did, and I never seemed to be good enough, and so I really became a human doing rather than a human being, and I found all my role, and I found all my purpose and significance in my performance. If I could just win more golf tournaments, if I could just achieve this and achieve that, and I was number 1 in wrestling in the state, and I was number 1 in golf, but yet it just never seemed to be enough. And so my purpose was just to perform hard enough and to get good enough and to be number 1 in everything I did, because I really had a tremendous fear of failure. And yet I didn't realize that that's okay, that God still loved me. And it really wasn't until later in my life that I found that. And I really found that He really did have and valued me, and really wanted to have a relationship with me. And today, that's what really sustains me. And if I try to make it complicated and I kind of run away and I don't really thrive on that friendship and that relationship with me, then my life just doesn't make sense. And so that's what this lesson is all about. It's just finding that purpose, realizing that we are of great value to the Lord, that He wants us just for who we are, that He sees our past, He sees our present, and if we'll just relax and just rest in that love, then our lives can really work, and we can just really understand why we're designed the way we are. One of the main characters in the Mulligan book is Paul. And Paul has a very similar experience in his life, and of course it gets into the book, gets into a lot of his background, but we find him, in the book really a driven person. He's finding all of his significance in his performance and the opinion of others, and he had to be number 1. And he had this tremendous fear of failure because he came from that same kind of background. He just didn't know which dad he was going to get, And usually it was one that just, he could never meet his expectations, and so he became this human doing. It was to such an extreme that he would never take a mulligan or ever give a mulligan, So it was really hard for him to really receive anything from anyone. And so he had that kind of heart. And, when you get in that position, the only way you're going to crack out of it is if you can really find that significance and that purpose and that security in a relationship with God. Well, in the book, we find Paul really kind of at the height of his extreme anger at himself, and he misses the 4-foot putt, and then he wants to quit, and he's walks over to the next tee, and Davis comes up and says, "You're really not that good to get that mad." Well, then that really just hits him, in his heart, and I play with a lot of guys, and they really need to hear that, But then, he says, if my dad was here, Davis Love III says, I would send you to him, because he used to say that golf stands for game of life first. And you see, what Paul had is he had his whole life wrapped up in himself, and he was finding his whole significance in his performance and the opinion of others. And so what game of life first means is that you can really only experience that game of life first when you have God first in your life, when He's your number 1 priority, and when you let Him value your life and you establish that relationship with Him, because then everything else just falls into place and life can really make sense, and you can begin to experience life the way it was meant to be lived. There's a number of hazards, that keep us from receiving God's love, and a lot of that is putting goals ahead of ourselves that we can't meet, making them too difficult to achieve, and then we get down on ourselves when we don't get to those, and there's a lot of tendency to have a lot of self-condemnation and frustration about ourselves instead of just living with who we are and realizing that we're valued And it makes a big difference when someone is, as we talked about in the Mulligan book, you know, that Paul was able to play a lot better golf, you know, when he realized that he had unlimited mulligans. And of course, we're going to get into that in some later sessions. But just as the basics, you know, to be loved by God and really know that, and to live within that love, you know, that He's always there, and that you can't compartmentalize that love, which is it's so easy to do. Think, well, this is my time for God, and this is my time for business, and this is my time for play, and you divide it all out, you know. And so it's like when I was growing up as a kid, we used to have these TV dinners. Do you remember those? You know, and there were little compartments. You'd tear the top off, and here was the corn and the beans and the potatoes, you know. And see, I think that's easy to do in our lives, to think this is how my life is, and here's my time for God, and here's my work, you know. But yet, if you think about it, the way it was explained to me is it's like our life is more like a chicken pot pie, see. And God is the gravy. And His grace just flows in every activity we have in life, see, you know, whether it's business or work. And so, you know, it's easy. And I meet a lot of men, you know, and they think, well, my time for God is on Sunday going to church, you know. And then when they you know, get back into the workplace, and, you know, this is my time to work and to make a living, and they don't really experience that love and His presence, you know, in the marketplace. And so I just try to think about that God's grace is the glue, you know, it's the gravy, and His love for me. And when I can experience that, then my life really makes sense, and I can live free. I can really live the kind of life I want to live.
Now that you've had some learnings, even heard some good stories, and you're about ready to go into a small group to talk about what you've learned, I want to share one last point with you. I have found that life and golf do so much better for me when I focus on game of life first. Because if you do, you really then enjoy the journey so much. Often we so are into outcome, we're so into accomplishing things. We got our lists in the morning, we know what we want to do and all those kind of things. And what happens is we miss the joy of the journey of life. Like in golf, I love to play NATO golf, not attached to outcome. And it doesn't mean that I don't care about my score, but it really means that I'm into the dance, I'm into the rhythm of the game. And this is what I think would really help your life when it's the game of life first. Because often, because we're rushing around and we're concentrating on goal accomplishment, that we miss the Esther moments that might be the only reason we exist in a given day. There's somebody at work who's really hurting, and we don't have an appointment with them on our BlackBerry or at our list and all. We go right by them. And what they really need is a word of encouragement or a little listening or a little support. So remember, enjoy life, enjoy the journey. Sure, the outcomes are important, but focus on the game of life first. Enjoy your group interaction.